All right. Welcome back, everyone. So tonight we're going to talk about prediction for Week 15. Last week I went 10-5. It was a pretty good week. Again, sometimes the scores aren't as don't quite meet the point spread, but picking the winners is really one of the big things I try and do here. So anyhow, let's go ahead and get right to it. I want to just point out that I'm in the process of making some program changes. So unfortunately, there is some graphical things that I'm still working on, but the calculations are all still correct. So here we go. Um, Rams versus Green Bay. I've got Green Bay is favored by 7.5. I'm showing that Green Bay is favored to win. So you can see that the correlated point spread has them right around 5.5 points, or has Green Bay favored by about 5.5 points. And the the point deviations show about the same thing. Overall, the Rams are a poor team. They certainly showed some progress last week with Baker Mayfield, but in the in the big scheme of things, it's really hard to take a really struggling Rams. As 7.5 points is always something, but when you take a home team at Green Bay and a struggling Rams, it's hard to it's hard to take the Rams in that case. We'll look at the run pass charts. Uh, Again, Green Bay, they look somewhat comparable. Um, when you look at the run pass charts, some things I would really point out is the overall sacks and turnovers are really a big difference maker when it comes to good football. And so the Rams aren't playing good football. Not that the Packers are; they certainly aren't very explosive. But right now, they just seem to be playing a lot stronger football. So next game, Patriots versus the Raiders. New England is favored by 1.5 points. And that's about what the model shows as well. It should be somewhat of a close game. It's a home game against in Las Vegas. Um, so that could have some impact, but I really don't think that will play a big impact. Not a whole lot of weather, not a whole lot of it's not a big home field advantage. Quite frankly, I don't think the Raiders have been all that great either. When you go to the run pass charts, um, again, one of the things and this makes a big difference. A lot of sacks, a lot of turnovers. And New England, they have some good explosiveness as well. So it seems to be favoring New England pretty much in most categories. Chargers versus Tennessee. The Chargers are favored by 2.5 points. The model is taking Tennessee. Model is showing that it's a big difference for Tennessee. Um, again, the model does have some skewing. I don't have the Bayesian revision available this week, but overall, I do think that Tennessee um, is a strong team all the way around, particularly when it comes to their rushing. They do have a strong defense, particularly against the rush. Granted, the Chargers are a much stronger passing team, and they can certainly blow the doors right off an opponent when they are strong. But let's get to the run pass charts, and this tells a lot of the story here. Um, the model does tend to favor the running team. We know that. Um, and when you look at the run pass charts, it's showing that Tennessee should be able to have a good run game against the Charger defense. And but it's also showing that the Charger offense, they've got a lot of explosive capability, which can obviously really lead to some pretty big point spreads as well. But the other thing is Chargers can also somewhat be inconsistent. So that should be interesting. In that one there, I am going to take Tennessee to um, either win or beat the point spread. All right, next game is Cincinnati against Tampa Bay. Cincinnati is favored by 3.5 points. The model likes Cincinnati by closer to 6 points. Um, and all in all, Tampa Bay has not been a particularly healthy team this year. And as we can see, the last 5 games resulted in wins for Cincinnati. which is always those trends I think are also very important as well. Then we come over here and look. It, it the run pass charts show that Cincinnati has a stronger, significantly stronger run game, and I would say it would look as though that they're somewhat equivalent in the pass game, although the upper reaches for Cincinnati are quite a bit stronger, I think. Um, uh, uh, when you look at they both seem to have pretty good protection for the quarterback. Tampa Bay quite a bit more so. I think Tom Brady's just really good at detecting the pass rush and getting rid of the ball better than Joe Burrow, who's going to try and hold it and make things happen. But at the same time, Cincinnati's got a lot more of an explosive offense, and we've pretty much seen that. So I'm willing to take Cincinnati with that one. Okay, Arizona against Denver. Denver is favored by 2.5 points. It's picking against two poor teams, and that's exactly what we have here. Is always difficult, especially since Kyler Murray, I think, just tore his ACL. That's really too bad for him. I always hate to hear that with any professional athlete. And then Russell. Um, Anyhow, uh, uh, Denver uh, uh, just got concussed, so I don't think he's going to be playing. So now you've got two poor teams that aren't going to have their starting quarterbacks. That's always a difficult one to predict. With this one, though, the model is saying that Denver should be better. Um, that's what's predicted. And so then when we go to the run pass charts, uh, as you can see, both teams have a hard time trouble sacks. Denver is worse. Um, Neither team is particularly explosive, but Denver is looking like they're better. I would also it's and when you look at the run pass games, showing Denver should have a better pass game, but I'm not really sure that that's a very predictable. The run game will probably be more deterministic on this, but again, when you look at, I think what'll be a big factor here is uh, the explosiveness. I think Denver has just shown a lot more capability to put up some level of points. Um, and because Arizona's been really poor, like I said, these are really hard games to pick when you have two really poor teams that both lost their quarterbacks. So if you have a choice to not bet on a game, this is certainly one that I wouldn't bet on. Okay, Philadelphia versus Chicago. Philadelphia's favored by 9.5. I'm going to go ahead and take Philadelphia with that point spread. As you can see, they've only lost one game, but that notwithstanding, when you look at uh, just their general trends, their last three games, they've really put up a lot of points. They're playing strong defense, um, and Chicago, uh, they're almost on the opposite direction. When we look at the run pass charts, um, Chicago is not only highly reliant on their run, they're reliant on their quarterback running the ball, which I think can also be problematic. Philadelphia's got a very well-rounded game. They control the ball well, they play strong defense, and they have explosive. So those are all good factors to lead me to believe that that's a good bet. That's an accurate point spread. Next game, Pittsburgh against Carolina. Carolina is favored by 2.5 points. The model says it's about even. Um, and I would say Carolina certainly have been playing quite a bit better football lately, winning their last two. Um, Beating Denver isn't necessarily a big feat, but they did put up 23 points against them. And furthermore, they beat Seattle in Seattle and put up 30 points against them. So they're certainly improving. And likewise, I would also point out that Pittsburgh has, I would say, generally speaking, played better, has been playing better, particularly in the second half of the season so far. Um, and so, with that, is it should be a close game. I realize it's at Carolina, but I'm going to go ahead and take Pittsburgh. Sorry, I skipped that slide. Let me go back. Looking at the run pass charts, um, a couple things that pop out at me is going to be Pittsburgh definitely is not as explosive as Carolina. That one for sure. They both can protect the quarterback and control the ball. I think what some of the bigger things are just lead to some slight advantages are a little bit more capability in passing the ball, and it's also showing that Pittsburgh should have a lot more possession of the ball. So all things being equal, that seems to be driving a slight point advantage towards Pittsburgh. All right, Dallas versus Jacksonville. I'm going to take Dallas in this case. They're favored by 4.5 points. The model shows that it's a closer point spread than that at the correlated point spread, giving Dallas a minus 1.2. When you look at the median point score, 23.5 to 20, so that 4.5 point spread is probably pretty accurate. But again, uh, Dallas can also be somewhat hard to pick. They barely got over Houston last week, but then the week before that they crushed Indianapolis by score 54-19. So they seem to sometimes play down the level of competition, but they're certainly a much better team when you look at their overall uh, offensive and defensive capabilities. But that notwithstanding, Jacksonville is certainly a capable team. I think that 4.5 point spread is accurate, and it would not surprise me if Dallas wins by 5 or wins by 4. So it's definitely right. I think that's a pretty good point spread overall. And then when you look at the run pass charts over here, um, I would say the biggest discriminator here is Dallas not only does a lot better job of controlling the ball, protecting the quarterback, um, but a lot more the explosiveness, as you can see in the lower right. That should make a big difference. All right, New York versus Detroit, and New York is favored by 0.5 point. So really, just which one do you think is going to win? The model really likes the Jets in this case. I have to say, Detroit has been playing really well of late, winning looks like 5 of their last 6. New York has not done as well. They've lost their last 2, but I think in their last 2 they've actually shown pretty well. Um, and then they had a nice win against Chicago as well. So again, uh, uh, I think New York is when you look at they've got a strong defense. Detroit has a relatively strong offense. They've actually done really well under Jared Goff, and then they've also had some pretty good explosive. So when we come over here and we look, you can see that uh, both teams have Detroit. They do a good job of protecting the quarterback, not turning the ball over, and they have some pretty good explosiveness as well. But overall, the numbers just seem to be trending more that New York should win that game. So we'll see how that turns out. Washington versus New York. Washington's favored by 4.5 points. I'm going to take the Giants. Um, uh, uh, in this case here, the model says that it's pretty even. So if you look at the median point spread, it has Commanders up by what's that, 3 points. The correlated point spread says that it's closer to about 2 points. The I just think the 4.5 points is a bit too much in this particular case. Again, one thing I would point out is uh, uh, sorry, I kind of got caught up on looking at um, the graphical output. Again, the product is in flux right now, so just saw some things I need to correct. But anyhow, when I go to the run pass charts here, um, the Giants are a pretty good team all the way around. Strong defense, strong running game, decent passing game. Washington has certainly shown a lot of promise this year. Uh, uh, both teams can probably do a lot better job controlling or protecting their quarterbacks. I just think that the 4.5 point spread for Washington is probably more, particularly given the stiff competition between these. Okay, New Orleans versus Atlanta. New Orleans favored by 4.5 points, and I'm going to take Atlanta. The model shows Atlanta should be winning by about 4.5 points. Now, I did see that Marcus Mariota appears to have left the team, been demoted. There might be some issues associated with it, with what's going on in that locker room, leading to the favoring of New Orleans, other than the fact that it's also at New Orleans. That's one of the things with the model. I try to that should exclude some of those factors. Not that they aren't relevant, but you still have to look at how that team plays. How well they play is the most dominating factor. Those other characteristics can influence a game, but that should not be the basis of making a decision on who you think is going to win, which is the whole point of trying to use analytics to do this. And I think the big thing you're going to point out is Atlanta's just got a more balanced running and passing game overall. And then it's also showing that there should be a lot more control of the football as well. Kansas City versus Houston. Houston's just a shit show of a team. They're in the bottom ranking all across the board, and obviously Kansas City is going to have a top-ranked offense. 14.5 points is a lot. They didn't beat the point spread last week, but at the same time, when you have a team as poor as Houston, it's really hard to take the under when you know that Kansas City could easily win 55-0. Um, and then when we come down here and look, uh, I think the most telling chart to me is the explosiveness that you see with Kansas City overall, and then just some of the lack of being able to protect the quarterback. I do notice that one of the things that's sometimes difficult to interpret is it shows that Houston should be running a lot of plays, but then again, their um, their overall capability of putting up a solid offense when they need to is what really shows up in the model as well. Buffalo versus Miami. Buffalo is favored by 7.5 points. I'm going to take Miami. I'm showing it should be a pretty close game with that. I realize it's in Buffalo. That might very well, the weather can be a stiff competition there, but that can also work both ways. When we go to the run pass charts, both teams I think are really, really good. I think Miami's done a lot better job protecting the quarterback. Both teams are very explosive. I think Miami is probably the most explosive offensive team in the NFL this year. Not to mention, I'll also say this, man, Buffalo just seems to play down the level of their competition every week. So Buffalo might very well win, but as the model says, it should be a close game. Baltimore versus Cleveland. Cleveland's favored by 2.5 points, and the model is taking Baltimore. Again, I know that Lamar Jackson probably is not playing, but at the same time, they have a really good team all the way around otherwise, particularly a fantastic rushing game and a fantastic defense, particularly against the rush, which is projecting to be able to slow down the Cleveland rushing game. And then when we come over here to the run pass charts, again, the overall balance of Baltimore as compared to what Cleveland's able to put up seems to really lead that difference. Again, it's hard to substitute in a new quarterback for Lamar Jackson, make a good pick. But again, you have to look at the fundamentals of the team, and that would seem to show to me that Baltimore is a superior team. Minnesota versus Indianapolis. Minnesota is favored by 4.5 points, and the model is showing that it should be a bit of a closer game than that. But with that, this is one of those cases where I'm looking at it and just saying that I think Indianapolis has been sliding downhill for a while. Minnesota, I think, is a solid team and getting better, but at the same time, and the model is also tended to underrepresent how good Minnesota is, And so with that, I think the 4.5 point spread is better. Again, I'm currently in the process of making some graphical changes to how I display certain parts of the model. That notwithstanding, um, when I look at the run pass charts overall, it shows that they're pretty even. But overall, I do think that uh, the model has not really shown how good Minnesota really is, and it has overrepresented Indianapolis's capability uh, to pretty consistently. So we'll see how that turns out. San Francisco versus Seattle. San Francisco is favored by 2.5 points. The model likes San Francisco quite a bit. And not to mention when you look at some recent play, I don't think that Seattle has been all that terribly strong in their last 4 games. They barely got over the Rams, and they lost to a poor Carolina team. Or let me phrase that: they lost at home to a mediocre Carolina team. And quite frankly, I think San Francisco was a strong team before they got Christian McCaffrey. And now I think they're Super Bowl favorites. When you look at the run pass charts, um, San Francisco, just superior running and passing game, very well combined. Really good, solid team all the way around. Seattle, I think, I don't think they're fooling people the way that they were at the beginning of the year. So I think that some teams have figured out their limitations, and I think that's also catching up with them. That concludes this week's show. Hope everyone does well, and have a good weekend.